I'll be honest, this story still makes my hands shake. My brother called me at 2:13 in the morning from a hospital parking garage, and before I could even say hello, he whispered, "Megan, the baby isn't mine." I sat up in bed so fast my husband woke beside me, but Ryan kept talking in that flat, terrified voice people use when fear has already passed through their body and left something colder behind. "Lauren is being induced in 6 hours," he said. "Her mother is here, her lawyer is here, and they want me to sign something before the baby comes." Then he said the sentence that made me get dressed without asking another question. "If I disappear tonight, check the blue folder in my truck." My name is Megan Carter, and at the time, I was 38, living in Columbus, Ohio, with a quiet job in medical billing, a tired marriage, and a family that had always treated silence like a form of loyalty. Ryan was my younger brother by 4 years, the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday, overpaid babysitters, shoveled elderly neighbors' driveways, and cried during dog rescue commercials, but pretended he had allergies. He had wanted to be a father for as long as I could remember. When we were kids, he used to carry our baby cousins around at reunions like they were made of glass, and when his wife Lauren announced she was pregnant after almost 3 years of trying, he called me from his driveway and sobbed so hard I thought somebody had died. So when he said the baby wasn't his, my first instinct was not anger. It was denial. Because some truths are so ugly your brain tries to protect you by refusing to let them enter all at once. I asked him how he knew, and for a few seconds, all I heard was the echo of cars moving somewhere above him in the hospital garage. Then he said, "Because Lauren forgot I have access to the patient portal." That was how it started. Not with a confession. Not with a private investigator. Not with some dramatic lipstick stain or hotel receipt. It started with a lab result buried inside a hospital app, under a tab called Genetic Screening, which Ryan had only opened because Lauren had asked him to print her insurance forms before the induction. He found a note from her OB's office about a paternity discrepancy. Those were the exact words. Paternity discrepancy. Two clean little medical words for a betrayal that had been living inside their house for 9 months. I threw jeans on in the dark, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and told my husband, Mark, that Ryan needed me at Riverside Hospital. Mark blinked at me from the hallway, half asleep and annoyed, and asked if this was really something that could not wait until morning. That question should have bothered me more than it did. But by then, my mind was already on Ryan, alone in that parking garage, surrounded by people who apparently knew more about his marriage than he did. The drive took 23 minutes. I remember every red light. I remember the wet streets shining under gas station signs. I remember thinking about Lauren's baby shower 2 weeks earlier, where she wore a cream-colored dress and rested one hand on her stomach, while everyone told Ryan he was already glowing like a dad. Lauren had looked perfect that day. Soft curls, pink lipstick, little diamond necklace, that sweet public smile she used when she wanted people to underestimate her. Her mother, Diane, had cried during the gift opening and said, "This baby is going to heal our whole family." At the time, I thought that was a strange thing to say. Now, driving toward the hospital, I could not stop hearing it. Heal what family? And why had Diane looked directly at Ryan when she said it? When I reached the hospital, I found Ryan on the third level of the garage, standing beside his silver Ford truck with his phone in one hand and a hospital bracelet already around his wrist. He looked 10 years older than he had at Thanksgiving. His hoodie was inside out, his hair was wet from rain, and his eyes were fixed on the elevator doors like he expected someone to come out and drag him back upstairs. I hugged him, and he did not hug me back at first. He just stood there, stiff and cold, before his whole body folded into me like he had been holding himself together with nothing but fear. "She knew," he whispered. "Megan, she knew before the nursery was painted." I pulled back and looked at him. "Lauren told you?" He shook his head and opened the passenger door of his truck. Inside, under a stack of unpaid medical bills and a folded baby blanket with tiny yellow ducks on it, was a blue folder with his name written across the front. The folder was thick. Too thick. Ryan handed it to me with both hands. "I made copies," he said. I sent one to my email, One to Dad's old account and one to you, scheduled for 8 a.m. if I don't cancel it. The way he said that made my stomach drop. Ryan, why would you need to do that? He looked past me toward the elevator again. Because Diane's lawyer told me I could still be the legal father if I signed before delivery. I stared at him. The rain tapped softly against the concrete behind us. And if you sign? I asked. Ryan's face tightened. Then I'm responsible for everything, he said. Medical bills, child support, custody fights, all of it. Even if the baby belongs to somebody else. I wanted to tell him that was impossible, but my job had taught me enough about forms, signatures, and desperate families to know that impossible things became real when the right people pushed paper fast enough. I opened the folder. On top was a printed message from Lauren to someone named Evan. The first line read, "Ryan will sign. He loves me too much not to." My hands went cold. "Who is Evan?" I asked. Ryan swallowed. "That's what I need you to understand," he said. "The baby's father isn't some random guy." Before he could say more, the elevator dinged. The doors opened. Lauren's mother stepped out first, wearing a beige coat and holding her phone like a weapon. Behind her stood Lauren, 9 months pregnant, pale, beautiful, and completely calm. And behind Lauren was my husband, Mark. For a few seconds, nobody said anything, because there are moments in life when your mind sees something before your heart is willing to accept it. My husband was standing behind my brother's pregnant wife at 2:41 in the morning, in a hospital parking garage. And he was not wearing the confused, sleepy expression of a man who had followed his wife because he was worried about family. He looked prepared. That was the word that hit me first. Prepared. Mark had on jeans, a dark jacket, and the old leather watch he only wore when he had meetings with clients who made more money than we did. His hair was wet from the rain, but his face was calm, almost empty, like he had rehearsed the scene and was irritated that I had arrived too early. "Mark," I said, though my voice barely sounded like mine. Ryan turned toward him slowly. I watched the understanding move across my brother's face, not all at once, but piece by piece, like glass cracking from the center. Lauren placed one hand over her stomach and looked at Ryan with soft, practiced sadness. "Ryan," she said, "you weren't supposed to find out like this." That sentence nearly broke him. Not because it was an apology. Because it wasn't. It was the kind of sentence people use when they are sorry the timing failed, not sorry for what they did. Diane stepped forward before anyone else could speak, holding her phone at chest level, like she was recording or ready to call someone important. "We need everyone to stay calm," she said. "This is a medical situation, and Lauren cannot be stressed right now." I looked at her. "Your daughter lied to my brother for 9 months, brought a lawyer to the hospital, tried to make him sign legal papers before the baby was born, and now you want calm?" Diane's eyes sharpened. "She is carrying a child." "So was that the plan?" I asked. "Use the baby as a shield before anyone could ask questions?" Lauren's face changed just enough for me to know I had hit something true. Ryan was still staring at Mark. "Why are you here?" he asked. Mark rubbed one hand over his mouth, the way he always did when he was buying time, and suddenly I hated that I knew his habits so well. "Megan called me," he said. I stared at him. No, I didn't. The lie came out too quickly, too smoothly. And for one terrible second, I wondered how many times I had believed that tone simply because it came from the man I slept beside every night. Ryan looked at me, then back at Mark. Nobody moved. Then Ryan reached into the blue folder and pulled out another printed page, this one folded so tightly the edges had gone soft. He handed it to me without taking his eyes off my husband. It was a screenshot from Lauren's phone. A message from Evan. "Mark said Megan won't be a problem if this gets handled before sunrise." My whole body went cold. I read it once. Then again. Then I looked at my husband, and the world seemed to narrow until there was only his face, that familiar face I had kissed goodbye in the hallway less than an hour earlier. "What does Evan mean by that?" I asked. Mark exhaled slowly. "You are misunderstanding something that has nothing to do with you." That was when Ryan laughed. It was not a normal laugh. It was the kind of sound people make when pain needs somewhere to go and finds the wrong door. "Nothing to do with her?" Ryan said. You're standing in a parking garage with my wife, her mother, and their lawyer at 3 in the morning, trying to help them trap me into raising another man's child. Lauren's voice broke, but not enough to sound real. It was never supposed to be a trap. Ryan turned to her, and I saw the last piece of hope leave his eyes. Then what was it supposed to be? Lauren looked at Diane. That small glance told us everything. Diane answered for her. It was supposed to be a family arrangement. A family arrangement. The words sat there between the cars and concrete pillars, ugly and polished, like something said in a lawyer's office instead of beside a man whose life had just been gutted. Ryan stepped closer to Lauren, though he kept enough distance that nobody could accuse him of touching her. Who is Evan? He asked again. Lauren looked down. Diane's joy tightened. Mark said, Ryan, let's not do this here. And that was the moment I realized my husband knew exactly who Evan was. I turned toward him. Tell me. He looked at me with irritation now, as if my confusion was becoming inconvenient. Evan is Diane's nephew, he said. Ryan shook his head. No, that's not all. Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but she still looked more frightened of Diane than of Ryan. Ryan opened the folder again and pulled out a hospital form. This is the genetic screening note, he said, handing it to me. The doctor flagged a possible inherited condition from the biological father's side. I scanned the page, not understanding the medical language at first, until one last name made my stomach twist. Whitmore. That was Diane's maiden name. Then Ryan pointed to another line. Potential donor-relative overlap. I looked up slowly. What does that mean? Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper. It means Lauren didn't just sleep with Evan. Lauren covered her mouth. Diane said, that is enough. But Ryan kept going, because once a man has nothing left to lose, fear becomes almost useless. She and Diane were trying to use me because if I signed as the father, nobody would look too closely at the real one. My skin prickled. Mark stepped forward. Ryan, stop. Ryan looked straight at him. Why? Because Evan isn't the father either. The parking garage went completely silent. Lauren started crying for real then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a small, defeated sound that made her seem younger than she was. And Diane, who had controlled every second until that moment, finally looked afraid. I turned to my husband. Mark, I whispered, what did you do? He looked at me then, and for the first time since the elevator opened, I saw panic. Not guilt. Panic. Before he could answer, Lauren doubled over with a sharp cry, clutching her stomach as the hospital bracelet slid down her wrist. Ryan moved toward her instinctively, because even after everything, he was still Ryan. But Diane stepped between them and held out the legal papers. Sign first, she said. And from behind me, my husband whispered, Megan, don't let him. For one terrifying second, I could not understand why my husband would stop Ryan from signing the papers if he had been helping Lauren's family hide the truth. Lauren was bent forward beside the elevator, one hand gripping her stomach and the other pressed against the concrete wall, while Diane held those legal forms like they mattered more than her own daughter's pain. Ryan moved toward Lauren again, because my brother's heart was always faster than his suspicion. But I grabbed his sleeve. Don't touch anything, I said quietly. He looked at me like I had slapped him. She's in pain, Megan. I know, I said, keeping my eyes on Diane. But they didn't bring you down here because she was in pain. Diane's face went hard. You should be ashamed of yourself, she said. A baby is coming and you are turning this into a courtroom drama. I almost laughed because she was standing in a parking garage at 3 in the morning with a lawyer waiting upstairs, trying to force a signature out of a man she had already betrayed. Then Mark stepped closer to me, lowering his voice in that calm private tone he used when he wanted me to stop embarrassing him in public. Megan, let Ryan walk away, he said. That is the only safe choice right now. Safe. That word made my stomach tighten. Safe for who? I asked. Mark did not answer. Lauren cried out again, louder this time, and Ryan's whole body pulled toward her like instinct was stronger than humiliation. Diane saw it too. She pushed the papers into his chest. Ryan, if you love this child at all, you will sign before we go upstairs. Ryan stared at the forms. I watched his hand tremble. And I knew he was thinking about the nursery, the little gray crib, the baby monitor he had tested 3 times, the tiny yellow ducks on the blanket still sitting in his truck. Love makes people brave, but it also makes them easy to trap. I took the papers from his hands before he could react. Diane snapped, "Those are not yours." "No," I said, flipping through them. "But apparently neither is the baby, so we are all adjusting." Mark muttered my name under his breath, but I ignored him. The document was written in careful legal language, full of phrases about voluntary acknowledgement, emotional fatherhood, financial responsibility, and the best interest of the child. But one section had already been highlighted. Ryan's signature line. Not Lauren's. Not the biological father's. Ryan's. Then I noticed something strange near the back. There was an attached page labeled Confidential Settlement Addendum, and under it was a payment schedule that made my blood run cold. Monthly transfers. College account. Medical coverage. A lump sum after birth. Ryan saw my face change. "What is it?" he asked. I looked up at Diane. "You were going to pay Lauren after he signed?" Diane's mouth tightened. Lauren sobbed, "Mom, please." That was when I understood something worse. Lauren was not only lying to Ryan. She was trapped too. Maybe by her mother. Maybe by Mark. Maybe by whoever the real father was. But her fear was real. Ryan stepped back like the concrete under him had shifted. "You were selling me my own fake family," he whispered. Diane lifted her chin. "We were protecting a child from scandal." Mark said sharply, "Diane." His tone stopped her. Not because he was loud, because he sounded like a man correcting someone who had said too much. I turned to him slowly. "You're not just involved," I said. "You're managing this." For the first time, my husband looked tired. Not sorry. Just tired of pretending I was too stupid to follow the room. "Megan, there are things you don't know about Lauren's family," he said. "And there are things Ryan should never have opened." Ryan's voice was rough. "My wife's medical portal?" "No," Mark said. "The folder in your truck." Every muscle in my body went still. Ryan and I looked at each other. Mark knew about the folder, which meant Lauren had told him, or Diane had told him, or someone had been watching Ryan closely enough to know what he had collected. Lauren's breathing grew faster, and a nurse's voice suddenly echoed from the elevator lobby upstairs, calling her name. But Diane did not move. She only looked at Ryan and said, "You still have a chance to be decent." Ryan's face twisted with pain. Decent would have been telling me before I built that crib. Lauren looked at him then, really looked at him, and something broke in her expression. "Ryan," she whispered, "I wanted to." Diane turned on her. "Do not." Lauren flinched. That flinch told me more than any confession. Mark stepped toward Lauren, but I moved between them before I even realized what I was doing. "Don't go near her," I said. He stared at me like I had become a stranger. Maybe I had. Or maybe I had finally stopped being useful. Lauren clutched the wall, crying through her breathing, and whispered, "The baby isn't Evan's." Ryan closed his eyes. Diane said, "Lauren, stop talking." But Lauren was shaking now, words spilling out like she had been holding them back for months and could not survive one more second of silence. "It was never Evan," she said. Evan was the name they used because it was easier. Ryan opened his eyes slowly. "Then who is the father?" Lauren looked at Mark. My chest went hollow. For one awful moment, I thought I already knew. But then Lauren shook her head, almost violently. "No," she cried. "Not Mark." The relief hit me so hard I nearly lost my balance. Then Mark said, very softly, "Lauren." It was a warning. Lauren looked at my husband with hatred and terror mixed together. "You promised this would be over before delivery," she said. "You promised Ryan would sign. My mother would get the money, and nobody would ever say his name." His name. Ryan's face went completely still. "Whose name?" he asked. Diane reached for Lauren, but Lauren pulled away and screamed from another contraction, loud enough that 2 nurses finally appeared near the elevator doors. Everything became movement. Nurses rushed in. Diane started talking over everyone. Mark grabbed my arm. Ryan stood frozen, staring at Lauren like the woman he loved had become a locked door with fire behind it. As the nurses guided Lauren toward the elevator, She turned back once, tears running down her face. And with everyone watching, she whispered, "Ask Mark about your father's accident." Lauren's words followed us into the elevator lobby like smoke. Ask Mark about your father's accident. For a second, I heard nothing else, not the nurses calling for a wheelchair, not Diane arguing about privacy, not Ryan breathing beside me like he had forgotten how to stand inside his own body. My father had been dead for 5 years. Frank Carter had died on a cold October morning on Route 315 when his pickup crossed the median and hit a concrete barrier before sunrise. That was what the police report said. That was what the insurance papers said. That was what Mark had told us to accept, because grief did not need conspiracy theories, and our father had been tired, overworked, and probably reaching for coffee when the truck drifted. I remembered that sentence because I hated it. Probably reaching for coffee. As if a man's whole life could be reduced to one careless movement in the dark. Ryan turned toward my husband so slowly that it scared me. "What does Lauren mean?" he asked. Mark did not look at him. He was watching the elevator doors close around Lauren, Diane, and the nurses, and his face had gone pale in a way I had never seen before. "Mark," I said, "what does she mean about Dad?" He swallowed, then looked at me with that same controlled expression he wore when bills were late, when clients were angry, when I cried and he wanted the conversation to end without actually comforting me. "She is in labor," he said. "She is scared, and she is saying things she does not understand." Ryan stepped closer. "Then explain it." Mark's eyes flicked to the blue folder in my hands. That folder had become the center of the whole night, even though I still did not understand why. I looked down at it, then back at him. "What is in here that you're so afraid of?" I asked. For the first time, Mark did not have an answer ready. That was when the elevator dinged again, and Diane's lawyer stepped out. He was a narrow man in a charcoal suit, too dressed for 3 in the morning, holding a tablet against his chest like it was a shield. He glanced at Ryan, then at me, then at Mark. "You need to come upstairs," he said to my husband. Not to Diane. Not to Lauren. To Mark. Ryan laughed once, bitter and quiet. "Of course," he said. "Because apparently everyone answers to my sister's husband now." The lawyer ignored him and kept his eyes on Mark. If this is not handled before delivery, the birth record becomes a problem. My stomach turned. Birth record. Handled. Problem. These people were talking about a baby like it was a misplaced document. I opened the blue folder again before anyone could stop me. Behind the messages, the settlement addendum, and the hospital note, there was a page I had skipped before because it did not look connected. It was an old insurance claim. My father's claim. I knew the policy number immediately because I had typed it into so many forms after he died that the digits still live somewhere in my hands. At the bottom was Mark's name. Not as a witness. Not as my husband. As the consulting representative for the company that paid the claim. I stared at the page until the letters blurred. "Why is your name on Dad's insurance file?" I asked. Mark's jaw tightened. "Megan, you are not thinking clearly." "No," I said, and my voice rose before I could stop it. "I have been thinking clearly for the first time in years." Ryan took the paper from me, scanned it, and went still. His face changed in a way I will never forget. It was not grief. It was recognition. "Dad called you the week before he died," Ryan said to Mark. Mark's eyes narrowed. Ryan looked at me. "I heard him in the garage. He was arguing with someone on the phone, and he said, 'If Megan knew what you did, she would never forgive you.'" The words moved through me slowly, finding old locked rooms I had refused to open. I remembered that week. Dad had come by our house unannounced with a brown grocery bag full of tomatoes from his garden, though it was too late in the season and most of them were small and hard. He had asked me if Mark was treating me well. I had laughed because the question felt old-fashioned and dramatic. Then Dad hugged me too tightly before leaving. 3 days later, he was dead. The lawyer stepped toward me. "Mrs. Ellis, I strongly advise you to stop reading private documents in a public area." Ryan turned on him. "You mean evidence?" The lawyer's mouth shut. Mark lowered his voice. "Ryan, don't make this worse than it needs to be." Ryan stared at him. Worse for who? That question hung there until the answer became obvious. Worse for Mark. Worse for Diane. Worse for whoever had spent the night trying to put Ryan's name on a child before anyone could trace where that child really came from. Then I found the last page in the folder. It was a photocopy of a storage receipt from a fertility clinic outside Cleveland. The clinic name meant nothing to me, but the handwritten note across the top made my knees weaken. Carter sample transferred, authorization disputed. Ryan leaned over my shoulder. "What does that mean?" he whispered. I already knew, even though my mind begged me not to. My father's name was printed below it. Frank Carter. Date of transfer, 6 months after his death. The hallway seemed to bend around me. "No," I whispered. Mark reached for the page, but I stepped back so sharply he stopped. "Tell me this is not what I think it is." His silence answered first. Then the lawyer said, "This is protected medical information." Ryan looked like he might be sick. "Was my father used?" he asked. Nobody answered. Ryan's voice broke. "Was Lauren carrying my father's child?" Mark closed his eyes. That was the confession. Not spoken. Worse than spoken. Because it arrived inside silence, wrapped in proof. I gripped the folder so hard the paper crumpled under my fingers. My brother's unborn child was not his son. It might be his half-brother. And someone had tried to make him sign away his life before he understood that. From upstairs, a hospital announcement echoed faintly through the ceiling. Then my phone buzzed. A new email had arrived. Sender, Dad's old account. Subject line, Megan, if Mark is still lying, open this now. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The hospital hallway, the lawyer, my brother's ruined face, the blue folder in my hands, all of it faded behind the impossible sight of my father's name glowing on my phone screen. Megan, if Mark is still lying, open this now. My father had been dead for 5 years. I knew that in the practical way grief teaches you to know things, because I had picked out his tie for the funeral, folded his work shirts into donation bags, and watched Ryan stand beside his coffin with both hands clenched at his sides. So seeing an email from his old account felt less like a message and more like a hand reaching out of the ground. Mark saw the screen before I could hide it. His face changed completely. Not irritated now. Not controlled. Not tired. Afraid. "Megan," he said, taking one step toward me, "do not open that here." Ryan moved between us before I could even react. "Back up," he said. Mark stared at him like he had forgotten Ryan was capable of becoming dangerous when someone he loved was cornered. The lawyer lifted both hands, trying to sound calm. "Mrs. Ellis, anything sent from that account could be fabricated, and opening it in front of witnesses may complicate matters unnecessarily." I looked at him, then at Mark, then at the elevator where Lauren had just disappeared to have a baby everyone had lied about. "Good," I said. "Let's complicate everything." I opened the email. There was no long message in the body, only one sentence from my father. "If you are reading this, I waited too long to protect you from the man you married." Attached were 3 files. A video, a scanned police statement, and an audio recording labeled Mark_Diane_clinic_call. Ryan whispered, "Play it." My thumb hovered over the video first, but Mark's voice cut through the hallway like a snapped wire. "Megan, I am warning you." That should have scared me. Instead, it made something inside me go still. Because husbands do not warn their wives unless they believe fear still belongs to them. I tapped the video. My father appeared on the screen, sitting at his old kitchen table, wearing the red flannel shirt he used to wear when he fixed the fence behind our house. He looked tired. Older than I remembered from that week before he died. But his eyes were clear. "Megan," he said, "I hope you never see this, because if you do, it means something happened to me before I found the right way to tell you." Ryan covered his mouth with one hand. I could feel my own breath shaking. Dad looked down at a folder on the table, then back at the camera. "Mark has been helping Diane Whitmore move medical records through a fertility clinic outside Cleveland," he said. At first, I thought it was insurance fraud, and I was going to take it to the state board. Mark looked away. That small movement confirmed every word before my father said more. Dad continued, voice rougher now. Then I found my own name in the transfer logs. Ryan made a sound beside me, low and broken. My sample was stored years ago, before your mother, and I started treatment after the cancer scare, Dad said. It was supposed to be destroyed after we had Ryan, but Diane's brother owned part of that clinic, and someone kept it. The hallways seemed to pulse around me. Not stolen after death. Kept for decades. Hidden in storage like a spare key to our bloodline. Dad swallowed hard on the video. I believe Mark found it while reviewing clinic claims, and I believe Diane wanted it because she has been trying to get access to the Carter Land Trust since before your mother died. Ryan whispered, the farm. I had not thought about the farm in years. Not really. 30 acres outside Delaware County, worth almost nothing when we were kids, then suddenly valuable when developers started buying land for subdivisions and medical offices. Dad had refused every offer. After his death, Ryan and I inherited it together. And Mark had been pressuring me to sell my half for years. My father leaned closer to the camera. If they can create a Carter heir connected to Diane's family, they can fight the trust, stall the sale, force settlements, and bury every illegal transfer behind custody paperwork. I felt sick. The baby was not only a secret. The baby was leverage. Ryan looked like he had been hollowed out. So Lauren was carrying Dad's child, he whispered. And they wanted me to sign as the father so nobody would question the DNA. Mark finally spoke, and his voice was low enough to scare me. You don't understand what your father did to people. I turned on him. What did he do, Mark? He looked at Ryan first, then at me, and there was something vicious in his expression now, something I had never allowed myself to see during all the quiet years of our marriage. He kept land that ruined families, Mark said. Diane's family lost everything because Frank Carter wouldn't sell when he had the chance. Ryan stared at him. So you helped them use my wife? Mark laughed once, but it had no humor in it. Lauren knew exactly what she agreed to. From somewhere upstairs, a baby monitor alarm echoed faintly through the hospital speakers, followed by hurried footsteps. Then my phone vibrated again. A second email appeared from Dad's account. This one had no subject line, only an attachment. A photo. I opened it with trembling fingers. It showed Mark and Diane standing outside my father's truck, 6 days before the crash. Diane was crying. Mark was holding the driver's side door open. And on the back seat, clear as daylight, was the same blue folder Ryan had found tonight. Before I could speak, a nurse ran out of the elevator, pale and breathless. Ryan Carter? She asked. Ryan turned. The nurse looked at all of us, then said, Lauren is asking for you, and she says the baby's real father just arrived. The nurse's words landed in the hallway with impossible weight. The baby's real father just arrived. Ryan stared at her, his face completely drained, while I stood beside him with my dead father's email still glowing in my hand and the blue folder pressed against my ribs like it could somehow keep me upright. For one awful second, I thought she meant our father. I know how insane that sounds. But by then, the night had already ripped through everything I believed was possible, and grief does strange things when it is dragged back into the room wearing proof. Ryan found his voice first. Who arrived? He asked. The nurse looked uncomfortable, as if she had already said more than she meant to say. She asked for you, she said carefully. She said you would understand once you saw him. Mark stepped forward immediately. He is not going upstairs. The nurse looked at him. And you are? My husband, I said, before he could answer. The man who has been lying to everyone in this hallway. Mark's eyes cut to mine, but I did not look away. Something had changed in me after hearing my father's voice. The fear was still there, but it was no longer staring. It had moved into the passenger seat, shaking and useless, while rage finally took the wheel. Ryan turned toward the elevator. I'm going to Lauren, he said. The lawyer moved to block him, but Ryan was bigger, younger, and broken in a way that made him look almost calm. Move, he said. The lawyer moved. We rode upstairs in silence. The four of us packed into the elevator with the nurse standing near the buttons, Mark behind me, Ryan beside me, and my father's video still paused on my phone screen. No one spoke, but the elevator seemed full of all the words we were avoiding. Baby, father, fraud, accident, murder maybe. When the doors opened onto labor and delivery, The smell of antiseptic and coffee hit me so hard that I almost cried, because hospitals are supposed to be places where families begin, not where they discover they have been used as evidence. Lauren's room was at the end of the hall. Before we reached it, Diane came out. Her hair was coming loose from its perfect bun, and for the first time all night, she looked less like a woman controlling a scandal and more like a mother whose plan had slipped out of her hands. "You cannot all go in," she said. Ryan did not stop walking. Diane grabbed his arm, and he looked down at her hand until she let go. "I loved your daughter," he said quietly. "Whatever you did, whatever you took, whatever you thought you were owed, you do not get to stand between us now." Diane's face twisted. For 1 second, I thought she might cry. Then she looked past Ryan at Mark. "You promised me this would not reach delivery," she said. I turned toward my husband. There was no shock left in me, only confirmation. Mark had not been helping them clean up a mistake. He had been running the clock. He needed Ryan's signature before the baby was born, before the birth record, before DNA, before Lauren broke under the pain and said something nobody could bury. Inside the room, Lauren screamed. Ryan pushed past Diane. I followed him. Lauren was sitting upright in the hospital bed, pale with sweat, her hair stuck to her face, one hand gripping the bed rail so hard her fingers looked bloodless. And beside her bed stood a man I had never seen before. He was older than Mark, maybe late 50s, with silver hair, expensive glasses, and a doctor's calm expression that made me dislike him instantly. He was holding Lauren's chart. Ryan stopped in the doorway. Lauren looked at him, and her face crumpled. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Ryan. I didn't know whose sample they used." The man closed the chart slowly. Mark said from behind me, "Lauren, stop talking." But Lauren looked past him with such hatred that even Diane went silent. "No," she said. "I am done letting you speak for me." Ryan stepped closer to the bed. "Lauren, who is he?" The older man adjusted his glasses. "My name is Dr. Caleb Whitmore," he said. "I am Lauren's uncle. Diane's brother. The fertility clinic. The disputed transfer." The whole room seemed to tighten around him. Ryan looked from Caleb to Lauren, and I saw him trying to put the pieces together without letting the truth crush him completely. Lauren reached for him, but he did not take her hand yet. "I never cheated on you," she said, and the words came out broken but clear. "I swear to God, Ryan, I never slept with anyone." Mark swore under his breath. Diane whispered, "Lauren, think about the baby." "I am thinking about the baby," Lauren cried. "That is why I have to tell him." Ryan's eyes filled with tears, but he stayed standing. "Then tell me." Lauren looked at Dr. Whitmore, then at her mother, then finally at my husband. "They told me we were doing a donor procedure because your test results were bad," she said. "They told me you knew, Ryan. They said you were too ashamed to talk about it." Ryan shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "I believed them at first," Lauren said, sobbing through another contraction. "Then I found out you had never signed anything, and when I tried to back out, Mark said the clinic records already had my name. My mother said our family would lose everything, and Caleb said nobody would believe me because I had agreed to the appointments." I looked at Mark. He would not meet my eyes. Ryan leaned against the bed, like his body could not carry the weight of standing anymore. Lauren's voice softened. "I thought the donor was anonymous until I saw Frank Carter's name on a locked file." The room went completely still. My father's name sounded different in that delivery room. Not dead. Not buried. Used. Ryan covered his face with both hands. Lauren reached for him again, and this time he did not pull away completely. "I was going to tell you after the birth," she whispered. "Then Mom brought the papers and said if you signed first, we could protect the baby from what they did." "Protect the baby," Ryan repeated, his voice empty. Dr. Whitmore cleared his throat. "There are complex legal factors here that none of you are qualified to understand." That sentence was the wrong one. Because Ryan turned toward him with a calm so cold I barely recognized my brother. "You used my dead father to create a child inside my wife," he said. "So choose your next words very carefully." Dr. Whitmore's face tightened. Mark stepped into the room. "Ryan, you need to leave before you do something stupid." And then Lauren screamed again, louder than before, and the monitors beside her began beeping faster. Nurses rushed in. A doctor followed. Everything became voices, movement, commands, bright lights. Ryan tried to step back, but Lauren grabbed his wrist with sudden strength. "Don't leave," she begged. "Please, Ryan, not until you hear the last part." The doctor told her to breathe. The nurse told us to move. Mark told Ryan to get out, but Lauren held on. Her eyes locked onto mine, wild and terrified. "Megan," she gasped, "your father didn't just leave a video." My breath stopped. Lauren squeezed Ryan's wrist harder. "He left a witness." Lauren's words cut through the delivery room louder than the monitors. "He left a witness." For a moment, nobody moved, because every person in that room understood that a witness was different from a file, different from an email, and different from a dead man's video stored somewhere safe. A witness could talk. A witness could point. A witness could remember the exact thing everyone else had spent 5 years trying to bury. Mark stepped toward Lauren so quickly that Ryan moved in front of him without thinking, and for one strange second, my brother looked less like a betrayed husband and more like a wall finally standing where a door had been left open for too long. "Don't come near her," Ryan said. Mark's face darkened. "You have no idea what she's doing." Lauren laughed through tears and pain, this awful broken sound that made the nurse beside her look up sharply. "She's telling the truth," Lauren whispered. "That's what I'm doing." Dr. Whitmore moved toward the foot of the bed, but the attending physician blocked him with one raised hand. "Unless you are on this patient's delivery team," she said firmly, "you need to step back now." For the first time that night, someone in authority spoke to Caleb Whitmore like he was just a man in the wrong room, and the look on his face told me he was not used to being treated that way. Lauren grabbed Ryan's wrist again as another contraction rolled through her, and even though his face was shattered, he stayed with her because that was who he was. "Megan," she said, turning her eyes toward me, "the witness is a woman named Nora Bell." The name meant nothing to me, but it meant something to Mark. His face changed so fast that my stomach dropped. Diane made a small choking sound from the doorway. Caleb whispered, "Lauren, you foolish girl." I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app with shaking hands, and held it where everyone could see. "Say that name again," I told her. Lauren breathed in hard, fighting through pain. "Nora Bell. She worked nights at the clinic when they transferred the sample. She saw Mark and Caleb arguing with your father 2 weeks before the accident." Ryan looked at my husband. "You saw Dad at the clinic?" Mark's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Lauren continued, her voice weakening but urgent. "Frank came back after hours because he knew records had been altered. Nora helped him make copies, and when he realized Mark was involved, he called her from the road the morning he died." My hands started trembling so badly that the phone shook. "What did he tell her?" I asked. Lauren's eyes filled with fresh tears. "He told her someone had loosened something on his truck." Ryan went completely still. The hospital room seemed to shrink around the bed, around Lauren's pain, around the baby that was about to be born into the middle of a crime nobody had been brave enough to name. Mark said, "This is insane." But his voice had changed. It was too loud now, too defensive, too late. Lauren looked at him with exhausted hatred. "You told me Nora was dead." Diane turned away from him. That one movement told me everything. She had believed it too. Mark had lied even to the people helping him, and somehow that made the whole thing more terrifying, because it meant there were secrets inside the secrets, and not even his accomplices knew where the bottom was. "Where's Nora?" I asked. Lauren squeezed her eyes shut as another contraction hit, and the doctor told everyone to step back, but Lauren shook her head and forced the words out anyway. "She's here," she gasped. "She works in this hospital now." She changed her last name after Mark found her apartment. My blood went cold. Ryan bent close to her. "What name?" Lauren grabbed the rail, crying, sweating, barely able to speak. "Ellis," she whispered. I froze. Ellis was Mark's last name. My last name. Lauren looked straight at me, and her voice fell into something almost apologetic. "Nora is Mark's first wife." The room dropped into silence. I stared at Mark, And suddenly the man I had been married to for 11 years became a stranger with another whole life folded behind his back. First wife. Not ex-girlfriend. Not old relationship. Wife. I had checked nothing when I married him because I thought love was trust, and now I realized trust had been the easiest place to hide a lie. Mark took one step backward. That was what made me believe Lauren more than anything else. Not the name, not the clinic, not even my father's warning. It was the fact that Mark, who had controlled every room all night, was suddenly looking for an exit. A nurse near the doorway cleared her throat. Her face was pale. "I know Nora," she said quietly. "She works records on the 4th floor." Caleb turned on her. "You do not need to involve yourself." The nurse looked at him, then at Lauren, then at me. And something in her expression hardened. "She called security 10 minutes ago," the nurse said. "She said if a woman named Megan Carter came upstairs, we were supposed to keep her away from Dr. Whitmore." Mark lunged for the door. Ryan caught him by the jacket and shoved him back hard enough that Caleb stepped forward, but hospital security appeared before anyone touched anyone else. Everything exploded into voices. Lauren screamed. The doctor shouted for the room to be cleared. Diane started crying against the wall. Mark yelled that this was a family matter. And all I could think was that every terrible person in that room kept using the word family like it meant ownership. Security pulled Mark into the hallway. Ryan stayed beside Lauren until the doctor ordered him out, but she held his hand one last time and whispered something I could not hear. Then a newborn cried. Small, angry, alive. The sound broke Ryan in half. He covered his mouth, stepped back into the hallway, and leaned against the wall while the door closed between him and the child that was not his son, but might be his brother. I found the stairs and ran to the 4th floor. My legs felt weak, my lungs burned, and every step seemed to pull me deeper into a version of my life I should have seen years earlier. Records was at the end of a quiet hallway. The lights were dim. A woman stood behind the glass window, holding a cardboard box against her chest. She was in her late 40s, with tired eyes, gray in her dark hair, and a scar along her jaw that looked too deliberate to be from chance. When she saw me, she did not ask who I was. She only said, "You look like Frank." My throat closed. "Nora." She nodded once, then unlocked the side door with shaking hands. "I waited 5 years for you to find me," she said. Before I could answer, she opened the box. Inside were clinic records, photographs of my father's truck, an old wedding certificate with Mark's name on it, and a sealed evidence bag holding something small, black, and metal. Nora lifted it carefully. "This came off your father's brake line," she whispered. Then the hallway elevator dinged behind me. Nora's eyes went wide. And when I turned around, I saw my husband stepping out with blood on his shirt. Mark stepped out of the elevator with blood on his shirt, and for one frozen second, I could not tell if it was his or someone else's. Nora pulled me behind the records room door so fast the cardboard box nearly slipped from her hands, and the tiny metal piece from my father's brake line clicked against the bottom like a small, terrible bell. Mark looked down the hallway and saw us immediately. There was no pretending left in his face now. No gentle husband. No calm fixer. No man who could explain everything if people would just stop being emotional. Only panic. "Megan," he said, raising both hands slowly, "you need to come with me." I stared at the dark red stains spreading near his ribs. "What happened to you?" He glanced down like he had forgotten the blood was there, then gave a strange little laugh that made Nora step farther back into the room. "Security overreacted," he said. "Ryan got emotional, and things got messy. But I knew my brother. Ryan could be furious, devastated, even reckless, but he would not leave blood on Mark's shirt and then vanish quietly from a hospital hallway. So I took my phone from my pocket and called Ryan. Mark's eyes dropped to the screen. "Don't," he said. I hit speaker. Ryan answered on the second ring, breathless and shaken. "Megan, where are you?" "4th floor records," I said, watching Mark's face. "Mark is here, and he has blood on his shirt." Ryan went silent for one awful beat. Then he said, "That's Caleb's blood." Nora gasped softly beside me. Ryan's voice lowered. "Mark tried to get into the stairwell after you, and Caleb grabbed him because the police had just arrived downstairs. They fought. Caleb hit the railing. He's alive, but Mark ran. Mark's expression collapsed into pure hatred. Not because Ryan was lying, because he wasn't. From behind me, Nora whispered, "Lock the door." I moved quickly, but Mark was faster. He rushed forward and hit the door with his shoulder just as the lock caught, making the glass shudder in its frame and sending a sound through the quiet hallway that felt too violent for a hospital. "Megan," he snapped, his voice suddenly low and vicious, "open the door before you turn this into something you cannot survive." That was the first time he said what he meant. Not our marriage. Not my safety. Not the baby. Survival. Nora set the box on the floor and pulled out the evidence bag again, holding it up where Mark could see it through the glass. "Frank knew," she said. "And now she does too." Mark stared at the little black metal piece, and something almost human flickered across his face. Fear. Nora's voice shook, but she kept going. "You told me you would never connect it to you, but Frank was smarter than both of us." Both of us. I turned toward her. She closed her eyes, ashamed before I even asked the question. "You helped him." Nora looked at me, and the years in her face seemed to deepen all at once. "I helped Mark hide clinic files," she whispered. "I did not know about the truck until Frank called me from the road and said his brakes felt wrong." The hallway outside filled with distant footsteps. Mark heard them too. His eyes moved toward the elevator, then back to me. "You don't understand," he said, and his voice cracked in a way that almost sounded like grief. "Frank was going to destroy everything." "No," I said. "He was going to expose you." Mark hit the glass once with his palm. Nora flinched. I didn't. Maybe because I had finally reached the end of fear, or maybe because my father's voice was still inside my head, telling me he had waited too long to protect me. So I stepped closer to the glass. "You used Lauren," I said. "You used Ryan. You used my father's name, his body, his medical records, and then you stood beside me at his funeral." Mark's face twisted. "I loved you." That almost broke me more than the threats. Because he said it like love could sit beside murder, fraud, and betrayal if it sounded sad enough. "No," I whispered. "You own the version of me that trusted you." Police officers appeared at the end of the hallway seconds later, followed by hospital security and Ryan, whose face was pale and wet with tears. Mark turned to run, but the stairwell door opened behind him. 2 more officers stepped out. And just like that, the man who had controlled every room in my life found himself with nowhere left to stand. He shouted my name when they put him against the wall. He said Nora was lying. He said Lauren was unstable. He said Ryan had attacked him. Then he looked straight at me and said, "Megan, tell them I would never hurt your father." I thought about Dad at my kitchen table, asking if Mark treated me well. I thought about Ryan painting a nursery for a child that had been created from theft. I thought about Lauren in that delivery bed, finally telling the truth while everyone tried to silence her. And I said nothing, because sometimes silence is cowardice. And sometimes silence is watching a liar realize you are done saving him. 6 months later, Ryan signed nothing. That was the part he repeated most often when people asked how he survived it. He had not signed the acknowledgement. He had not taken legal responsibility for a child created through fraud. He had realized the baby wasn't his before it was too late. But the truth was more complicated than that, because the baby was not just some stranger's child. The baby was named Oliver. And biologically, Oliver was my father's son. Ryan's half-brother. My half-brother. Lauren cried the first time Ryan came to see him, not because she expected forgiveness, but because she had finally understood what her silence had almost cost him. Ryan stood beside the crib for a long time, looking down at that tiny sleeping face, and then he said something I still think about. He didn't ask to be evidence. After that, everything became legal language. Fraud charges. Medical board investigations. Civil suits. A reopened accident case. The clinic shut down within a year, and Dr. Caleb Whitmore lost his license before he ever stood trial. Diane tried to blame Mark for everything, but the settlement papers, the clinic records, and Lauren's messages told a different story. My father's land trust stayed with Ryan and me. Not because the money mattered most. Because for the first time, nobody was allowed to use our family name as a lock on someone else's cage. As for Mark, he pleaded not guilty for a long time. Then Nora testified. She brought the break-line piece, the clinic logs, the wedding certificate, and the voicemails my father left the morning he died. The courtroom went silent when they played his voice. I could not look at Ryan. He could not look at me. Because hearing Dad scared was worse than hearing he had died. Mark was convicted on fraud and obstruction first, then later charged in connection with my father's crash after investigators found enough physical evidence to move forward. I wish I could say the conviction healed something. It didn't. It only gave our grief a shape. Lauren moved 3 states away with Oliver after the custody case ended, and Ryan chose not to fight for a place in the child's life, though he sends a birthday card every year with no return address. I asked him once why he still does that. He looked at me for a long time and said, because Dad would have. That answer destroyed me quietly. My own marriage ended in a stack of documents on a conference room table, beside a box holding my wedding ring, my changed name, and every photograph where Mark's arm was around me like protection. Nora and I are not friends. Maybe we never will be. But every December, she sends me a card with one sentence inside. Frank deserved better. She is right. Ryan is different now. Softer in some places, harder in others. He sold the house he shared with Lauren, donated the nursery furniture, and kept only the yellow duck blanket from his truck, folded in a drawer he says he never opens. But I know he does. Sometimes grief needs an object small enough to hold. And me? I still hear Mark's voice sometimes, especially late at night, when the house settles and my phone lights up with an unknown number. I never answer. Because the worst part of betrayal is not discovering that someone lied. It is realizing how long you helped them do it by trusting the face they gave you. My brother thought he was losing a baby that night. Instead, he almost lost his future, his name, his inheritance, and the last clean memory he had of our father. All because people with money, fear, and old grudges believed one signature could make the truth disappear. But Ryan did not sign. Lauren finally spoke. Nora finally stopped hiding. And my father, somehow, reached us from beyond the grave before the lie became permanent. Still, there is one thing I have never been able to explain. The first email from Dad's account was scheduled years earlier. But the second one, the one with the photo of Mark and Diane by his truck, was sent live that night. Nora swears it wasn't her. Ryan swears it wasn't him. And Mark, when his attorney asked about it, refused to answer. So sometimes, when I think this story is over, I remember that someone else was watching us in that hospital. Someone who knew exactly when the truth needed one final push. And whoever they were, they saved my brother before it was too late.